I'm Cruz Devon, and welcome to This Gay Life. Today we're going to be talking with Reverend Martin J. Raffanon, and he's from Missourians for Freedom and Justice. And this is an interesting group that's part of Show Me Equality, I believe. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Martin?
Cruz, I'm a ELCA pastor, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America pastor, and I've been a pastor for the last 20 years in the St. Louis area. And earlier this year I was asked by my church, the Central State Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, to take on the leadership of Missourians for Freedom and Justice, which is an organization, a political organization, which opposes the proposed initiative of the Amendment Coalition, which would threaten basic constitutional liberties for all Missouri citizens.
And tell us a little bit about the organization, Missourians for Freedom and Justice.
Missourians for Freedom and Justice was created in June of last year when a number of people gathered together to establish an organization that could provide a religious voice to oppose the voice of the radical right. Stephen Kaler, a person who is a member of the Ethical Society, decided that he would gather a group of people together in his home, and they would begin to think about ways in which the religious community could come together to stand in opposition to some of the things that were being said by the fundamentalist churches and other organizations in the Christian church. And they decided to bring together as many people as possible to do that. And that was the beginning of Missourians for Freedom and Justice. And now our organization really has representatives from 11 different denominations in Missouri. And we are a very strong organization that will work in collaboration with other religious organizations in Missouri to oppose the Amendment Coalition and this initiative, which is proposed for the November 8th ballot.
And they're still gathering signatures.
Signatures are being gathered, and we will learn Friday, July the 8th, whether they have enough signatures to be on the ballot. We believe that their signature gathering has been going well, and we think that they will be on the ballot.
Well, from the religious point of view, why is this such a bad amendment?
Well, we believe that the initiative, this amendment to the Missouri Constitution, really attacks basic constitutional liberties for all Missouri citizens by attempting to fence out one group of people, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, and denying that group of people their rights under the law, equal access and the use of the legislative process. And it's a very dangerous precedent. When you deny rights to one group of people, then who is the next group to be targeted so that the rights can be denied to them? So Missourians for Freedom and Justice stands very strongly opposed to this dangerous legislation, because what it does is it attempts to legislate the private morality of one group of people onto the public policy of our state. We believe that the extreme right elements of our state want to control our government by changing the very structure of that government. And they're using the smokescreen of an attack on gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons in our state to achieve that goal. We think that that will have very, very negative consequences for our state. We believe that it attacks basic freedoms and liberties for all the people of Missouri. We believe that it's a very divisive thing to be doing, that it threatens a group of people in our state, gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons who I think the fair-minded people of Missouri do not want to see gay, lesbian, bisexual persons discriminated against. Now, our opponents say that it's an issue of special rights versus equal rights. And we say that the equal rights that we want to protect are rights that all citizens are due, and that those rights are very simple. Number one, the right of all citizens to have a home, a job, and access in a public accommodation and service in a public accommodation without discrimination. Every citizen in our country has the right to a home, a job, and service in a public accommodation without discrimination, and every citizen deserves the right to pursue those goals legislatively. What our opponents are seeking to do is they want to remove gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons from the opportunity of pursuing those goals legislatively. And that's a problem.
Well, that in itself sounds rather unconstitutional.
It is. It's a group of folks wanting to change the rules of the game. In other words, all of us deserve equal access and rights under the Constitution of the United States. In other words, all of us should have the equal access to the legislative process and to the legal process. And what this amendment does is it says that one group of people cannot have the same kind of access. That hinders that group of people from pursuing their goals. And in our country, that would be an attack on our basic democratic liberties.
And that's no longer a level playing field.
Exactly.
It basically
Absolutely.
puts somebody in
In other words, I agree that the Amendment Coalition and the people who support the Amendment Coalition have every right to pursue their ends using the legislative process, which they are doing with this amendment. That is their right, and in this country they have the right to pursue that goal. I am saying let us not keep other people from having the same kind of right, the same kind of opportunity. This is what our country is about, equal opportunity for all people. And what this amendment does is it limits the access and the opportunity of one group of people. It's a dangerous precedent. We shouldn't allow it, and it is an attack not just on this group of people, but on constitutional liberties and freedoms for all Missouri citizens.
You have a copy here of the actual wording. Would you mind kind of reading that to us and kind of giving us an idea of what that really means?
Before I read this amendment, just let me say that the way that this amendment was written is that it is extremely confusing. The language is extremely confusing. And even when I read this proposed amendment through, I think very few of your viewers are going to understand what this amendment really means. And it's intentionally written in this way so that the voters will be confused about what it is that they're voting for. This is an amendment which possibly changes our Constitution in 8 separate places. So the Amendment Coalition is seeking to change our Constitution.
Considerably.
Exactly. Missourians for Freedom and Justice and Show Me Equality, which opposes the Amendment Coalition, we're saying leave our Constitution alone. It's working well just the way it is. But it's our opponents now, the Amendment Coalition, that are seeking to change the structure of government for their own ends. So as I read this amendment, be aware of the fact that it is intentionally confusing. I'll read a shorter version that I think explains it a little more clearly. But here's the proposed amendment. Neither the state of Missouri, through any of its branches, departments, or agencies, nor any of its political subdivisions, including counties, municipalities, or school districts, shall enact, adopt, or enforce any statute, order, regulation, rule, ordinance, resolution, or policy whereby homosexual, lesbian, or bisexual activity, conduct, or orientation shall entitle any person or class of persons to have or demand any minority status, protected status, quota preference, affirmative action, or claim of discrimination. This section of the Constitution shall be in all respects self-executing. Now,
Kind of negative, isn't it?
our polling indicates that 8 out of 10 Missouri citizens, even after a half hour of discussion about this amendment, do not understand what it means. And that 1 out of 4 Missouri citizens votes the opposite of the way they feel. So that indicates that this is a confusing amendment, written intentionally so, to try to trick the Missouri electorate. Now here's a translation. Neither the state government nor any level of government below it can take any action which would allow people who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual to be protected against discrimination. This will require no other legislation to take effect. Now, Jack Danforth, in opposing this amendment, said that what it did was it fenced out a group of people from the legislative process. He said that it was a mean-spirited amendment, it was gay bashing, that would bring ridicule to the state of Missouri and ridicule to the people of Missouri, that it would have unknown consequences for our state, and that we should oppose it very strongly. And he opposes it very strongly. Same thing is true of Thomas Eagleton. He said in his opposition to this amendment that there are times when a certain ugliness takes over in politics. And this is one of those times in the state of Missouri, where a group of people are trying to do something which is very, very ugly. And that ugliness is simply this. It's trying to fence one group of people out of their rights as people of this country, and it is an attack on those rights for all the people of the state of Missouri. So I think that we need to politically, very strongly oppose this amendment, and I, for one, am going to work strongly within the religious community to generate support for opposing and defeating this amendment.
You said there's 11 denominations. Can you tell us a few of the denominations that are working within this group?
The denominations that originally started the group included the Presbyterian Church USA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, United Methodist Church, and others. I keep forgetting all of them, but they're the Episcopal Church, and we're currently working very strongly to make a case to the Roman Catholic Church through the Archdiocesan Human Rights Commission and the Missouri Catholic Conference, trying to make a case for why this amendment is a very bad amendment and bad policy, bad law, bad legislation for the state of Missouri, and why the Catholic Church should not support it, should oppose it. We hope that the Catholic Church will be able to make a definitive statement on this amendment sometime later on in the summer or early fall.
Well, there's a lot of people that would say, well, didn't the Catholic Church just come out with a anti-homosexual letter that they circulated throughout all of their churches?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because when you talk about religious communities, we're all right now discussing at one level or another the issue of homosexuality and sexuality in general. I mean, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, we've just produced a new sexuality document which is being discussed by our entire church body. And so I can't say what all of the positions are relative to homosexuality in our supporting churches, because we have a variety of positions on the issue, and we're right now in the process of struggling through our understanding of the issue of sexuality and homosexuality in particular, and coming to some resolution. And I think that'll take some years more of discussion and work within our churches. But this particular amendment doesn't have, we believe it doesn't have anything to do with the issue of homosexuality as an issue. What it has to do with is an issue of constitutional liberty and freedom. And that's why all of our churches have been very actively opposing it. We're conflicted on the issue of homosexuality and sexuality in general, but on the issue of rights, human rights for all people, and equal access under the law and legislative access, there we're in absolute agreement. And we believe that this amendment threatens that for all Missouri citizens. That's why we oppose it. I think that, you know, my opinion is that all of our churches are now having to struggle with the issues of sexuality in a new way. In other words, I think in the past we haven't dealt with these issues openly, honestly, and forthrightly with each other. I think now the time has come for us to open the door, as it were, to a real, forthright, open discussion of these issues and begin to get somewhere in terms of how our congregations, how our denominations will respond to these issues in the life of the church.
If something like this actually gets passed, I mean, obviously we have a precedent with Colorado. They tried to pass something like that, and now it's costing the state an immense amount of money, both in tourism and in conventions, and not to mention all the bad press. Now everybody goes, Colorado, you know, and there's kind of one of those feelings about it. Besides that, I mean, if this were to pass, besides all the rigmarole of having to drag it through the courts and costing Missouri a lot of money, there is the potential, wouldn't there be, to start picking out groups one by one and saying, well, this is another group we're not too hot on. Let's see if we can add that on to this particular amendment.
This amendment has so many negative consequences for the state of Missouri. I mean, you've covered some of them. Number one, it's going to be a lot of money out of our pockets, because this thing will be challenged in the courts, and you and I will be paying out of our own pocket to defend the constitutionality of this issue in the courts. We will be spending millions of dollars. And the reality is that this thing has stood nowhere. It's been seen as unconstitutional everywhere where it has passed. So the Amendment Coalition, in putting this before Missouri voters, if it does pass, we are the ones that are going to be spending money to defend the constitutionality of something that we know is going to be deemed unconstitutional. It hasn't stood anywhere in the courts. Secondly, we don't know what the result will be relative to the loss of business for our state, but we know it could be very, very significant. And third, and also very importantly, the result of this amendment has been an increase in violence toward gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons in every place where it has passed.
Or even people just thought to be gay and lesbian.
That's correct.
Not necessarily
Absolutely.
Gay and lesbian.
Right, because it has nothing to do with behavior in that in that regard. It has everything to do with people's perception of others. And the increase in violence is something that we must be very, very careful about, and we need to avoid that in every possible way by defeating this amendment now and working hard to defeat it. We can do that in Missouri, because I think the people in Missouri are ready to say that we don't want the extreme right changing our government for its own ends. We don't want that to happen.
Well, and not to mention it is a very expensive red herring.
Absolutely.
Extremely expensive, especially if you've kept up with anything that's going on in Colorado. As far as like the churches locally, what can churches locally do to get involved? I mean, I realize a lot of churches, because of their nonprofit status, basically cannot go out on a political campaign. But are there things that can be done in order to, help people at least go and educate themselves on what this is about?
Well, number one, we want everyone to participate in our system of government, in our democracy. To the extent that people need here to be registered, to vote, to actively participate in the debate on these issues is very, very important. That's a part of our heritage as American people, and we encourage everyone to register and to vote. We also encourage people to become actively involved in this type of referendum issue, because it does have a lot to do with how our state will be viewed and what our state will be doing in the future. And so every person who's a member of our state should be concerned about that. Mm-hmm. I want to commend the folks on the radical right. They have shown us wonderfully, beautifully, how to organize churches. And they're doing it exceptionally well. They're able to use the church network extremely well for their political goals. They are learning how to do grassroots political organizing. They have very sophisticated media potential. You put those three things together and you have a very powerful political movement, which the radical right now and extreme right is beginning to flex some of those muscles, and they're doing it exceptionally well in all parts of the United States. You may have noticed recently that these types of organizations have taken over in various Republican parties in various states in the United States, and they are doing very, very well in organizing churches. Representing an opposing viewpoint and an opposing religious viewpoint, I would hope that we could begin to do some of the same things that our opponents are already doing exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is just that our own religious communities would become more knowledgeable about these issues, might be more willing to take action in opposition to some of these things that they are opposed to from their values and from their vision of what our world is about and how God is acting in their lives. We're just in the beginning of that process, and really this particular amendment is a wake-up call for us. It's an opportunity for us to begin the process of organizing in opposition to already a well-organized religious network.
Well, we already had a little taste of that here. The last election we had in April, there was something about the process of voting on whether or not something could be rezoned. And it seemed after everybody listened to all of their leaders and all of the people that they trusted, they began to find out that for some reason this was really going to be a lot different than what they said it was. And even though they may be organized and they may have some very good slogans and stuff that are very easy to repeat and very easy to get into, they're kind of like jingles. You might want to look a little deeper than that, especially, I mean, if we're fighting jingles, we're we're having to use a lot more.
This is the point. This is the point. They have the jingles. You see, on this particular issue, they have what are called silver bullets in a political sense. In other words, these are terms which they can use which don't have to be defined by them. In other words, the electorate provides the definition. And as the electorate provides the definition the way they would like that definition to be, they can connect at an emotional level to these issues. Now, that is nothing more than good, hard political work on their part. They have found the slogans that work for them, that connect to their values. Now, what I'm saying is that we need to do the same kind of thing. We need to find the phrases that connect strongly to who we are, to our identity as people of God. They have done that, and their coming forward with this kind of legislation shows that they're very effective in doing this kind of work. We need to become as effective as they are. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're in the process of learning, and they're showing us that we had better be good pupils in this regard, that we have a lot of work yet to do. Our organization, for example, Missourians for Freedom and Justice, we're beginning to sense that we're a campaign organization related to this particular issue. But as the more we do this work, the more we understand that there are other issues out there that we're going to have to pay some attention to. For example, the radical right has many issues related to our public schools, to reproductive rights, to women's rights, to civil rights in general, to censorship. Many other areas, they have a very strong agenda which is openly stated in their literature and in the work that they produce, in their political documentation and so forth. They know where they're going, they have an agenda, and by the way, they point to other people's agenda, but they certainly have an agenda themselves.
And they're much more organized.
And they're working with their agenda. I don't see why they would be opposed to other people having an agenda. They certainly have one.
Yeah,
So,
they've kind of put a bad taint on the word agenda, even though they seem to have a very strong one.
as I said, they have their own. But what I'm saying is that they have an idea of where they're going. They have a mission. They have a sense out of their own values of the direction they want to pursue. I'm saying that we can do the same thing. And Missourians for Freedom and Justice, we want to do two things. Number one, we want to provide a counter-religious voice to the radical right. A counter-religious voice. In other words, they don't have the only religious voice in the world. They'd like to believe that they do, but that's not the case.
Yeah, they seem to stand up and say, as Christians, we think this. And I happen to know
I am
a lot
a Christian
of
too.
Christians.
I'm a born-again Christian. And I don't believe some of the stuff they say they believe. But I believe in God. I believe in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit active in my life. These are things I believe. But I don't believe in some of the stuff that they're putting out on the table. Now, we have a difference, don't we? I mean, they are people who believe a certain thing, and I believe something else. Well, the genius of our system, the democratic system, allows for those differences and tolerance to be available to people with differing religious viewpoints. I think what the radical right is beginning to do is say, hey, we can't have that kind of tolerance. You know, their tolerance level is very low. And I'm saying that we need to sustain an open mind and a tolerant mind toward all of our faith communities and all of the religious vantage points that are out there. And that it's for us to kind of tear down the walls between people so we can come together. I have no human enemies. Paul Summers is not my enemy. This is my brother in Christ. All right? So we belong to the same family, a family in God, family in Christ. However, we disagree. We have a very different idea of what God is doing in this world.
And the Constitution makes sure that both of you can have your points of view.
Absolutely, but I don't dislike Paul Summers. I'm going to fight against what Paul Summers believes. and the system that he is trying to put forward. But my job as a Christian person is to love Paul Summers. My job as a Christian person is to love you, to love, to me,
Everyone.
God is love. And that is our calling as people of faith, to extend that love, that welcome, that invitation, that grace to all people. And if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job.
And not necessarily to censor. For our people at home, the viewers, churches can get involved in contacting Missourians for Freedom and Justice, and also individuals can as well. Is there other things, like people who may or may not want to necessarily get totally jump into the pool on this, is there other things that they can do?
Well, of course, we're looking for people to write letters to their political leaders and to the media. We are looking for people who are willing to give a lot of money to our campaign. We're a political organization, so we're going to win with people and money, and we're not ashamed to say that. And so we do want people to be involved, and we want people to provide us with the funds necessary to make this work and to win. I think people need to be, as much as possible, to learn about this issue. I mean, that's very, very important, because each one of us has contacts every day of our lives, and to the extent that we can share where we're coming from, what we believe, and how we're going to act in our own lives may help someone else to make an important decision in their lives. So I would say that those are all things that people can do. To the extent that they want to become more involved, I would say connect with our organization, with Show Me Equality, which is the statewide campaign organization against this amendment. There are so many things that can be done in the course of this campaign. We'll have mailings to do, we'll have phone banks to take care of, we'll be going door to door, we'll be working to organize various sectors of our community. There are just so many things that need to be done that couldn't be named in the time we have. But definitely you can make a connection with Missourians for Freedom and Justice or Show Me Equality, and our organizations would be glad to work with the viewers that would like to be involved, and to provide a job that they can do or feel that they're capable of doing.
That's great. I think it's really important that everyone really get involved to the extent you can. I mean, even the smallest portion of just talking amongst your coworkers or your friends about the particular amendment and see how they feel, and maybe you can get together and talk about it and learn more about it. If you'd like some more information about Missourians for Freedom and Justice, there's the address right there, P.O. Box 50225, St. Louis, Missouri 63105, and there's a telephone number there. Go ahead and write that down. If you happen to miss that, or you're running for a pencil right now, if you want some information on Show Me Equality or Missourians for Freedom and Justice, you can give us a call at our telephone number here at This Gay Life, or you can give us, write us or whatever. Please get involved if you can in any way, shape, or form, because it is important. I mean, it's not just a gay rights thing. Basically, it has to do with civil liberties. Thanks for joining us on This Gay Life. I'm Cruz Devon.